Welcome back. So, last time we talked about the different religious alliances of countries post Martin Luther and the 95 Theses. This Reformation and different and changing religious ideas that started off a road trip of different changes across the European landscape. And today we are going to be looking at the response of the Catholic Church to these things. So these questions have been kind of simmering for several years as the Catholic Church and as bishops and the Pope have been seeing all of these changing ideas and the people reading the Bible more. And they realize, we should probably come up with an answer to some of these questions. And that is what prompted them to meet up in 1545 for the Council of Trent. This is around 20 years after Martin Luther was excommunicated from the church. So it's been quite a while. There's been quite a few changes since then. And not only was it a time for the Catholic Church to be thinking about how do we respond to Protestantism, how do we respond to these new ideas, but also there are problems here in the Catholic Church. What are we going to do to end these so that we can please the people that are here that are calling us out on these problems? And so they were meeting up to end corruption and the abuse of indulgences. Here, meeting up to reform the church and its practices and its teaching. They decided we need to improve priest education. We need to improve how much our people know so they can teach other people better. And they also denounced Protestantism. So they said, this is not something that we agree with, and we are not going to accept it. And the other portion of this council was to figure out, okay, how do we do that? We've decided what we want to do. We want to end corruption. We want to reform the church. We want to make sure people know the Catholics' beliefs, our beliefs, and we want to stop Protestantism where we can. And one of the ways that was created to make these things go and be seen was the founding of the Society of Jesus, which would be known as the Jesuits. And Ignatius Loyola was the one who founded this group. It was a highly educated wing of Catholic Church priests. So Loyola went and found, fellow classmates, friends, alliances, people in the church that he brought together to come up with this mission of the Jesuits. What are we trying to achieve? How are we doing it? And from this, they came up with 3 different missions for their group to go and do. One, they wanted to make more religious schools around Europe, following with what the Council of Trent had wanted in improving priest education. This group would go and create universities, create colleges and schools for priests to go to be educated in all things religion and theology and biblical. Second, you're going to send out missionaries to places that haven't heard of Catholics yet. This is where you have Francis Xavier, the first missionary to Japan. The Jesuits were the pushing force. He was a part of this group that was sent as this part of this mission. And the third mission was to stop the spread of Protestantism. And this came about in a few different ways, but the most known and the most notorious way was through the Inquisition. And what the Inquisition was, it was church officials and an inquisitor who would go around and essentially make sure that Catholic beliefs and doctrine were being followed. And they created an index. And this index was a list of offenses that they said, these are wrong. If we see people doing these, we are going to punish them. And so what came out of it was kind of this fear of, if you're not following this thing, you're going to be punished or tortured. The Spanish Inquisition especially was known for being very brutal. There was all kinds of torture that was come up with to essentially root out Protestantism. People would start, giving up names and blaming people for having beliefs different from the Catholic Church. And so there was an incredible fear based upon religion. That is part of the reason why Spanish stayed so devoutly Catholic, because any religious minorities were pushed aside or pushed down. Also, as a way to also increase people's interest in religion, there was more art made from it. So you have Baroque art like this one here. Because even still, after the printing press, a lot of rural areas, people couldn't read. So the church was using images, using paintings and church structures and statues as a way to show religion, as a way to get people emotionally invested in what they believed without having to read something. There was a new Bible that was created and put out, and also as a part of these differences in religion, there was a lot of religious wars that happened, especially in Germany, because there was all of these different princes. And in 1555, the Peace of Augsburg was signed between the Holy Roman Empire and the princes of the German states. The Catholic Church kind of encouraged this to make people work out their religious differences. And they came up with this statement here. I'm probably going to butcher the Latin, but it's cuius regio eius religio. And it translates to whose realm his religion. And this essentially means that whoever was in power over a certain area, they got to say what that region's religion was. So if I'm a Catholic and I become a ruler of this place, I can now say, this place is Catholic now. And for a while, that helped to dispel some of the conflicts between different states. So, results of the Protestant Reformation, good and bad. So you have a splintering of the Christian church. Now, obviously, as we've seen, there's so many different religious ideas. The Roman Catholic Church is no longer the only church, the only religion of the area. And because of that, you have near constant religious wars. People just fighting on the basis of, you don't believe the same thing that I believe, so let's fight, come at me. You also had an increase in the Pope's power. Kind of, although people were coming up with religious ideas apart from Catholicism, the Catholic Church kind of upped its game. They did more. They reformed the church. They became better. And so people started supporting this church more because they saw these changes that they were doing that were making things better. And so the power of the Pope increased. You also have, despite the religion part of it, more people thinking secularly, individually, and more doubt and skepticism. You have people who are valuing political stability over religious truth. So kind of like Church of England, the Henry VIII making up his own church and taking different religious ideas as a way to make his own country, his own power even more secure. Also in the 1600s, as a consequence of these religious ideas spreading across Europe, you had a witch craze that spread everywhere. People were holding on really strongly to their religious ideas, and so the definitions and the types of witches that were being seen and called for sometimes were based upon having different religions, and it had a very, very large influence across, especially rural areas. You had thousands of people killed in Germany and Switzerland and England who were executed as witches, either upon the basis of some religious idea that people weren't following, or just plain old differences in ideas or the ways that things should be done. And unfortunately, that is not the end of the story. These religious conflicts eventually will come to a head and cause massive waves throughout Europe.